a media report suggests the U.S. is working toward an agreement that would normalize relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel.
While the White House won't confirm the report, it would be a significant breakthrough in the region. CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell explains what's behind the optimism.
The negotiations, reported by Axios, would transfer control of 2 islands from Egypt to Saudi Arabia. Israel is involved because of a 1979 peace agreement with Egypt. CBN News asked Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Gilad Erdan, about the report.
I cannot comment directly, but we know it's not a secret that we celebrate the Abraham Accords. Israel is a peace-seeking country, and we want to expand this new circle of peace. And we hope that Saudi Arabia will be one of the next countries to join this circle of peace. We pray for it.
One question being asked is, why now?
Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and America, they are strategical partners. It's very important for America to be present in the Middle East and having good relations with those 2 countries.
Former Israeli ambassador to Egypt, Zvi Mazel, says while these 3 countries need each other, the Biden administration has seen a shift in relations.
The problem is that, in principle, the United States has decided, and it was said many times, to get away from the Middle East.
Saudi involvement in the 2018 assassination of journalist Jamal Khashoggi strained relations with the U.S. According to Mazel, however, compromise could happen for the sake of standing against Iran.
Facing Iran is the Sunni countries, led by Saudi Arabia, with the Emirates, with Bahrain, with Egypt, absolutely. But they need also Israel, because Israel is the only country among them that has an interest to face, even with violence, even with war, Iran.
Mazel says every country has its own interest, and one way to unite them would be for Biden to build upon the Abraham Accords, engineered by the Trump administration. Those agreements saw the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco normalize relations with Israel.
They gave them a very important aim to be together on economic and security basis. It was a big success. Now Biden, since his election, he has done nothing to encourage other Arab countries to join those Abraham Accords.
Mazel says Biden took a positive step by keeping the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps on the terror list, although negotiations to sign a nuclear deal are ongoing.
Going back to the JCPO, no, absolutely. The nuclear agreement to Iran is not an opening, absolutely not. It's the beginning of the end and a kind of corridor to war.
If the reported island deal were to succeed, it could possibly expand the Abraham Accords-style relations, and that would open the door to more economic cooperation in the Middle East and strengthen the coalition standing against Iran. Gordon?
Well, Chris, these rumors that Saudi Arabia was going to join the Abraham Accords go all the way back to the Trump administration. So what are the main issues bringing about this potential diplomatic breakthrough?
Well, Gordon, I think the main issues right now, two of them are oil in Iran. All these nations that are involved, Egypt, Israel, and Saudi Arabia here in the Middle East, you know, they all see Iran as a mortal enemy, and with Iran wanting to dominate the entire region. Saudi Arabia, they want the protection from Iran's terror proxies, especially the Houthis in Yemen, literally right on their border, that have been firing ballistic missiles into Saudi Arabia. They want a commitment by the U.S. that will guarantee their security. And then, of course, Gordon, with gas prices hitting historic highs in the U.S., the Biden administration, they want Saudi Arabia to pump more oil to the U.S. and global markets to reduce the price of oil and then the price of gas. And one other issue, Gordon, would be that the U.S. wants Saudi Arabia to shift their policies away from Russia and China and back to the U.S.
Well, you recently traveled to Bahrain and the UAE and met with many of the leaders there. What did you hear about the Abraham Accords?
Yeah, Gordon, I went with a delegation led by Joel Rosenberg. He's the author, editor-in-chief, who's been on the 700 Club many times, editor-in-chief of All Israel News. Here's some of the main themes we heard from a number of leaders there in the UAE, Bahrain, and actually here in Israel. First, there's really a deep commitment to the Accords. And right now, it's not just the countries. Now we're seeing people-to-people relations. One of the leaders there told us it's sort of like cousins getting to know each other. Second, despite today's report about this rapprochement possibly between Saudi Arabia and the U.S. and Israel, they felt that the Abraham Accords would have done much better. They would have progressed further to many nations and possibly to Saudi Arabia if the Trump administration had remained in power. And having said that, former U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Dan Shapiro, he wrote recently that there are discussions underway right now for President Biden to visit Saudi Arabia next month. And finally, Gordon, they emphasize that Iran is their number one threat. In fact, we heard from Bahrain's Ministry of Interior, and he told us there are three main threats: where Iran, and Iran.
Well, this coming Sunday, Israelis will be celebrating Jerusalem Day. Tell us what that is and why are so many concerned about the possibility of another war between Hamas and Israel?
Well, 55 years ago, on the Hebrew calendar this Sunday, they marked the reunification of the city of Jerusalem during the 1967 Six-Day War. That was commemorated by that docudrama that you produced, Gordon, and CBN issued, In Our Hands, The Battle for Jerusalem. And right now, security forces here in Israel are on high alert because on Sunday, thousands of Israelis are going to be marching in and around the old city with flags, with Israeli flags, and they'll be singing and dancing. And they're also going through the Muslim quarter. The Palestinians on the other side are warning of an explosion because of the march. And the fear right now here in Jerusalem, Gordon, is that another war is going to break out just like it did last year. During last year's march, Hamas began firing from the Gaza Strip to missiles all the way, almost reaching here in Jerusalem. And lately, with terror attacks, with 20 Israelis dead in the last several weeks, riots on the Temple Mount. Some say this is like a perfect storm gathering, and that's why it's so important for people around the world to be praying for the peace of Jerusalem.
Well, Chris, we'll certainly be doing that. Thanks for joining us and being with us. That film, In Our Hands, that Chris mentioned, directed by Erin Zimmerman, written and directed by her, we're going to be re-releasing it next week to commemorate on our calendar, not the Jewish calendar, on our calendar, the Six-Day War, the reunification of Jerusalem, quite possibly the biggest prophetic fulfillment in my generation. And it's a wonderful film. Erin has done a wonderful job with it. We'll re-release it next